Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session of Dorset Council Western and Southern Planning Committee on the 28th day of May. We reconvene after the morning session and we'll just have a roll call of councillors. Councillor Peter Barrow.
Present.
Councillor Clayton.
I'm here.
Councillor Corking.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Dunseith.
Here.
Councillor David Gray.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Nick Ireland.
Present.
Louis O'Leary, I think, is not present this afternoon. Councillor David Shortell.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Here.
And Councillor Kate Weller.
Here.
Excellent. Right. We now reconvene for item 5C, WD/D/19/001056. I had mentioned before we broke that I was going to have discussions with officers, and the purpose of that is because we have had commentary in respect of the ownership of property, and ownership of property has nothing to do with planning and our planning decisions that we will make this afternoon, and you will hear more about that in a minute. So this item is going to be presented by Joe Riley. Hello, good afternoon, Joe.
Hello. Can you see my presentation?
We can see you.
Right, let me just share with you. Are you seeing my PowerPoint presentation?
Not at the minute.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
seeing you, Joe.
Jean, you need to turn your camera off.
That's good. We can see the logo and the details of the application.
Are you seeing it go up and down?
It's not moving yet, but we can see the facing page.
There's your cursor, Joe.
Yeah.
And
So it's going up and
facing
down now.
location plan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So it's an application for a bungalow or a single-storey dwelling, whatever you wish to call it. This is the location plan. This is Portesham Hill, and this is Front Street. It's 34 Front Street, and the entrance is round about here. This is the application site, and the other land that the applicant owns is in blue. This is another aerial photograph. It's a little bit out of date because there's some more houses that have been built down here, I believe. This is existing access. This is the listed building, and this is the application site in red. And actually what you can just see there on the aerial is a sort of a marked out where the proposed bungalow would go. That's just another layout showing the siting of the proposed bungalow. Now, the footprint of the bungalow altogether is 136 square metres. It is a large footprint because by its nature it's a bungalow, so when you compare it to, say, a two-storey dwelling, it is larger but not substantially larger given its character. This plan is just to show you the development boundary. It is like the one we heard earlier, adjacent to the development boundary. This is the black line showing where the development boundary, and the application site is this area of land here. So it's outside but adjacent to the development boundary. It is also within the Portesham Conservation Area. The site is round about here where it says Northmead Farm, And you can see the conservation area takes in the wider context of the village of Portesham. But we do not consider that it would have a negative impact on the character of the conservation area because it is set back away from the street frontage. So the proposed bungalow, it would be 3 bedrooms. The proposed materials are timber for the walls and slate for the roof and green UPVC windows. I have added a condition that that slate and that timber would be natural materials so we can have some further control on its appearance. And we consider its simple form without dormers or roof lights, has a sort of a rural feel, no more harmful to the character of the area than say a rural building on the farm. The entrance is here, either side of here. That's facing west, and it's 3 bedrooms. The applicant has shown a bedroom for an elderly relative. That is a possibility. His mother lives in the property next door, which is the Grade 2 listed building, and that would free up that listed building to get some improvements. This is the site entrance. It's compacted crushed stone. It leads into sort of a series of farm buildings. This is the Grade 2 listed building adjacent. This, as you go into the site off of Front Street, you can see it is kind of used as a farm. There's some farm buildings here. This is looking back. These are properties on the other side of Front Street, and this is looking back to see the existing access track. There's no changes proposed to the entrance, no changes proposed to the surfacing, no objections from the highways officers because it's using the existing setup for the farm operations. That's the building that's on the left-hand side of the site when you first go in. As you go down the track, the listed building is here. As you go past the listed building is here on the right-hand side. You go down the track and then you turn right into the site. It's all very well screened. There's some more farm buildings there. This is looking back. That's Front Street looking back in that direction. This is the applicant's existing mobile home or caravan that he has, and that received a certificate of lawful use in 2016. There were some comments from the parish council that that mobile home should be removed, and the applicant did offer that, but that has a lawful use, so there's no reason that that would need to be moved unless we considered that having a new dwelling and the caravan on the site was harmful. When you have permission for a new dwelling, there are permitted development rights as well to put a temporary building on the site during the construction, so the chances are that the applicant would continue to live in there until the new dwelling was constructed. This is just showing it in context. The listed building is right back here, and the site, you go off to the site onto the left hand side. And this is what you could see from the aerial photograph, where the applicant has sort of marked out on the site with some materials already, and the listed building is in the distance on this hand side, not that building there that you can see. So in terms of the policy issues, it is outside the DDB but very adjacent to. There's already an established use for a dwelling on that piece of land. It will add a minor amount of supply to the housing land supply, which, as we know, is 4.83 at the moment. It is in a conservation area, but you can't see it from the context of the street scene or from the setting of the listed building. It is a single story design, a simple plain design. I've also put a condition on so that he couldn't add any roof alterations or dormers or any other clutter to the roof without having to come back in for permission. and the existing mobile home has an established use, so we didn't feel it was necessary to consider that was removed. And just as a reminder, we had this issue raised about land ownership when the application very first came in, and I've put it to the applicant's agent, and I've had numerous emails and confirmation that the application has been made correctly and that the applicant owns the land. And as the chairman said, it's a private matter. If you grant planning permission, you're not authorising somebody to build something on somebody else's land in any case. So we don't feel that that is a material consideration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Joe. Can we now have the representations from members of the public, whether read by Chelsea Gollidge? Do we have
Sorry, Chair,
Anne
Dan Collins here. I'll read the first one from the members of the public and then Chelsea will be reading the rest.
Thank you.
So we've received a representation from Paul Dunlop of Blanchard's Bailey. We've been instructed by Mrs. Ruth Chip Marshall, Mrs. Susan White and Miss Susan Chip, joint beneficial owners of the land in question, under Land Registry Title number DT 43384, to file an objection to the applicant's proposed erection of a single-storey dwelling at Trafalgar Farm, because the applicant does not own the land in his sole name and because the building is in the curtilage of Trafalgar House, which is a notable Grade 2 listed Georgian building. Our clients only received notice of the planning committee meeting on Friday the 22nd of May, and we were only instructed on the 26th of May due to the bank holiday. Our clients have not been given sufficient time to fully particularise their objections. If the committee require further documentation to support what is stated, then the meeting should be adjourned and our clients provided with a reasonable period to provide this. Mrs. Dunlop has gone on to provide further information in the letter, but it's personal information and is not considered to be suitable for reading out at a public meeting, Chairman.
Thank you, Anne. So, Anne, Blanchard Bailey are a firm of solicitors?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. Firm of solicitors acting on behalf of those people writing the letter. Yes.
And shall we hear from our legal officer at this point? From Lara, do you have any comments to make? So I'm asking a question of the Dorset Council solicitor, Lara Altree, whether Lara has anything to add at this stage.
Chairman, I think your planning officers have covered it, but basically we have seen a land registry entry that does show the appropriate ownership, so the council doesn't have to look behind that entry. So unless you've got anything else, that's all I would add.
One small point for Anne. Anne did mention that it was a listed property adjacent to this site, and I think you said it was a Grade 2, is that correct, or Grade 2 star?
Chairman, there is a Grade 2 listed property adjacent Trafalgar Farm. Jo pointed out in her presentation.
Yes, Grade 2. Right, thank you. Can we now have any representations from other members of the public?
Okay, so we have one from Ray Doggett from Chesil Bank, Parish Councillor and Chair of the Planning and Development Working Group. He says, ladies and gentlemen, I chair the working group which reviews difficult or contentious plan applications on behalf of the CBPC for their subsequent agreement and submission to the planning authority. CBPC objects to this application but offers an alternative solution. Trafalgar Farm is a very large site, but the Grade 2 listed building and its associated wall garden and the area of land depicted in red in the plan application, the proposed site of the future dwelling, form part of the original overall curtilage of Trafalgar House. The integrity of that curtilage should be preserved and not impacted by the proposed new dwelling. Although the ownership and future inheritance of the site is contested and causes considerable difficulties for various factions of the family, and technically this is not a planning consideration, resolution of their problems will be made easier in due course by not placing the new dwelling within the curtilage area. There is plenty of space outside the curtilage area in which the new dwelling could be sited, described as follows in the CBPC submission. Build a new dwelling within the existing area for which a certificate of lawful use allows for the caravan, as depicted in black in the application. There is sufficient space, particularly if the rough track was moved to one side. or build the new dwelling just to the northeast of the lawful use area and to the north of the track. Planning Committee members, if they are minded to approve the application, are respectfully requested to ensure the dwelling is placed outside the curtilage area, or refuse the application and advise the applicant to resubmit accordingly. And then we have a statement from the agent, Richard Burgess. Mr. Chairman, councillors, I make these points on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Dave Coombs, who wishes to provide a replacement dwelling for himself and his elderly mother. Mr. Coombs styles himself as Portesham's last yeoman farmer, in that he works single-handedly his farm extending from Front Street right up to Hardy's Monument. He currently lives in a rather dilapidated mobile home near the front of the site, which urgently requires replacement. Mr. Coombs has lived and worked in the village nearly all his life, although he did live abroad in Weymouth for a couple of years. His mother, who currently lives in but does not own Trafalgar House, a Grade 2 listed building in dilapidated condition which is adjacent to the site, has even better qualifications for accommodation in the village. I understand she has only left the village 3 times in her life to go to Dorset Hospital. The site, as you have heard, is just outside the development boundary, but will not be seen from the road since it is screened by a high wall. Hopefully, the construction of this house, as well as providing much needed accommodation for 2 local residents, will enable Trafalgar House to be sold for restoration. With regard to the Conservation Officer comments, I would suggest that the greater good in both conservation and housing terms will be served by rehousing both the applicant and his mother and getting the situation with Trafalgar House resolved so that it can be sold and restored. Let me just say a little about the comments of the Parish Council that no doubt led to this application being referred to this committee. With respect to them, they did seem to get confused by considerations of land ownership, even though, as you have seen, they will not entirely oppose the proposal. In fact, I can tell you that all the land within the red line set out in the application falls within the applicant's registered title, as can be confirmed by the examination of land registry documentation. No other person has any registered interest in the site. As far as the matter of being within or just outside the village's development boundary is concerned, recent permissions just outside the development boundary have included the extension to the Fries development on the west side of the village, as well as a new dwelling again for a local resident somewhat further from the village centre on Winters Lane. I would therefore ask you to support this officer's recommendation and approve this urgently needed accommodation for 2 local folk. That's it, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any comments from any councillors at this stage? In the absence of any comments from any councillors at this stage, I would like to ask the officers, the case officer, also Anne Collins, and indeed the legal officer Lara, about this statement about the fact that this particular site is within the curtilage of the listed building.
Maybe I should address that. I don't.
Should we start with that, Joe?
Yeah.
Would you like to comment on what we've heard? We have heard the fact cited that this particular site is within the curtilage of a listed building.
Well, there has been comments that it's also called the orchard, but from my site visit, there's a clear definition between the domestic garden of the listed building and this larger piece of land, and it's well separated with trees. You can't even you can't see the listed building from the site. And on the site plan, there's a clear line which shows the east end boundary of number 34 Portesham. So I would suggest that historically the curtilage ends where the black line of the boundary is on the OS plans and on the site plan. You don't get the impression when you're on the site that it is the domestic curtilage of the listed building. And in my report, I have referred to the setting of the listed building, so I think that is the material consideration. Thank you.
Lara, would you like to make any particular comment in relation to the curtilage of a listed building?
Yes, Chairman, not particularly on the curtilage as such, but as the case officer has said, the relevant thing for her to consider is the setting of the listed building, which she has gone through in her report and has just spoken about. And again, the committee has to determine the application that's before it rather than any other application that might come in.
Yes, there was considerable commentary about what other alternatives might have been forthcoming, but I just want to see your own thoughts as to whether this proposed new dwelling would actually be within the curtilage of a existing listed building.
Chairman, I'm not able to answer that specific question, but as I've said, the relevant question to ask or consider is the setting of the listed building.
Right.
And that's what the case officer has considered in her report.
And you have no reason to believe that it has a substantial effect on the setting of a listed building because of the screening, etc.
No, I don't disagree with what the planning officer has said.
Thank you. So, councillors, do we have any questions or comments?
Chair, could Joe just share the slide that shows the DDB and the plan itself, with it being outside of the DDB?
Are you seeing that plan?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, thank you. Is that clear? Do you want me to comment on that?
If you'd like to make any comment.
Well, where the blue arrow is, that's
yes.
the red line of the application site, and then yes. The black line adjacent to it is the development boundary.
So I'm next going to ask Anne Collins, are there any material planning reasons why Joe Riley's conclusions are not correct?
No, Chair, there aren't. I accord with her recommendation.
Right, thank you. Do we have any comments from any other members of the committee?
Should we move to a vote, Chair?
Yes, indeed.
I'll propose if we accept
okay.
it.
And do we have so Councillor Gray is wishing to propose approval.
I'm happy to second that, Chair. Councillor Clayton.
Councillor Clayton is wishing to second approval of this application. Do we have any other comments from members of the committee? Councillor Weller, I do see you put a note on the chat box function. Do you have any comments to make?
No, it's okay now. I as the pictures were going through, I saw the answer to what I needed to know, so that's fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, and Councillor David Gray, you put forward a proposal to approve, and I take it that you don't need to see any more plans or...
No, I'm happy.
Maps. Right, so we will now proceed to a vote for approval. Councillor Peter Barrow.
I approve.
Councillor Clayton for the formalities. I know you seconded it.
Approve.
Councillor Susan Cocking.
Approve.
Councillor Jean Dunseith. I don't know if we have Councillor Jean Dunseith here at the moment. Councillor David Gray for the formalities. I know you proposed it.
Approve.
Councillor Nick Ireland.
Approve.
Councillor Louis O'Leary, I believe, is not in attendance this afternoon.
Approved, Chairman.
Councillor Dunseith approves. Councillor David Shortell.
I approve, Chairman.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Approve.
Councillor Kate Weller.
Approve.
And I approve as well. So I think that's just about unanimous of the members present this afternoon. So we will now move on to what would have been included on the afternoon session. And we will next listen to a presentation in respect of application WD/D19/002093, Old Schoolhouse, Look Lane, Punnell, Dorchester, DT29BD, the erection of a double-storey extension and alterations, with Darren Rogers presenting. Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Rogers.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, fine. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Yes, Chairman, members, this is an application, domestic application for a double-storey extension with some very minor alterations to this particular property in the village of Punnell. As you can see, this is the application site. This is just showing you the confines of where the site is in relation to the village of Punnell. If I just zoom in on this location plan,
Darren. It's not moving.
Can you see that?
No.
No, we can't see a plan, Mr. Rogers.
You can't see a plan?
No.
No, we can only see the first page.
No, no plan.
I don't know why that would be, because let me just
Darren, it's Anne here. We can see the first page of the committee report. We can see your committee report rather than the PowerPoint.
I beg your pardon. I'll tell you what then, let me just start that again, and let me just try and oops a daisy.
Started with the end in mind, by the looks of it.
Yeah, I'll try it again. How's that?
That's good.
Okay, can you see the front sheet again?
Yes, we can see the logo.
And can you see me moving up and down now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start again. Yeah, the old schoolhouse in Punnell. It's an application for a double-storey extension with some very minor alterations to the house. Can you see my pointer moving now?
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. So this is the application site in relation to the wider village itself in terms of location. You can see it's towards the eastern end of the village. And if I just zoom in, you'll see that the old school hall itself is this building here on the corner. And adjacent to that is, I think, an old teachers dwelling, obviously called the old schoolhouse. And then just to the north of that is the kind of garden and curtilage area to this particular dwelling. This shows an aerial view. So you've got the old school on the corner, which is now the village hall. You've got the existing dwelling located here. And then you've got this corner area and a little bit of a rear part, which forms the curtilage to this particular dwelling. This shows it in a better detail. So there's the existing house. This is the proposed two-storey extension with some minor alterations to the existing house set at the rear, and you can see the curtilage to the house is effectively what I'm showing you in terms of the arrow. Existing houses at Myrtle Cottage here, and an existing dwelling located here. Here's some photographs, Chairman. This is the former school, now the village hall. This is the existing dwelling. You can see it's very diminutive in terms of its scale, with a front porch, and it's enclosed by this attractive stone wall with a gated access. And just to the side here, you can see the residential curtilage to this particular property. And this photograph at the bottom shows obviously the front elevation of that particular dwelling. This is the old school hall on the corner, so you can see it's a very vernacular, traditional designed building set in the conservation area context. And at the bottom, this is the view from Look Lane, where there's a little kind of pulling car parking area with steps up into the side garden area. And you can see the dwelling with its gable, wall and chimney, which is obviously forming a bit of a prominent feature of that part of the street scene. This is pulling back towards the bottom, just pulling back a little bit further from the street scene. So you've got the existing cottages on the right hand side, which are located, these properties here, and that's the prominent gable that you currently can see with the chimney. You can't see that because it's masked by this property up on the left hand side. So as you go around that corner, this is the feature that you see with the application site and the gable and its chimney located there. And again, some more photographs. That's a similar one to what I've already shown you. And this is the side garden area with that wall and the gable wall with the chimney here, the gable wall with a bit more of a modern dwelling located here. So this is the garden area itself. And again, I think I've already showed you this top one. This is the one at the bottom that shows the existing cottages here, and it's in this area here where the application site is proposed. There's the existing shed, which is there. So these are the elevations, Chairman. This is the front elevation. This is the two-storey extension that's proposed. You can see that there's the existing wall that's located there. There is an existing, which hasn't come through on the photographs, but an existing lean-to set at the side and the rear of the property. That will all be got rid of, and there will be a two-storey extension put in its place. This is the rear elevation, so you can see that little lean-to just located there. A couple of Velux roof lights located there, and a couple in the existing outbuilding set at the back. And then this is the elevation that you would see outlined in a ghost there. You've got that single story bit that would be removed and replaced with this new gabled two-story extension in that space that I've just indicated to you. The layout plans show that a bit more clearly. That's the existing wall where the existing access will be maintained that leads from the yard area into that side garden area. But the remainder of the wall would be removed, and you would be left with a ground floor dining and kitchen with some bifold doors that come out onto that garden area, and a bedroom and a bathroom directly above it. Here are the materials, Chairman, which is natural stone and render, slate to match, UPVC windows, which we wouldn't normally sanction in a conservation area, but there are existing UPVC windows in the existing dwelling, and also the doors are intended to be UPVC doors as well. So the key planning points here, Chairman, and this is where the planning balance comes into effect. Under normal circumstances, the extension in itself, as I've said here, the principle of doing this is normally considered acceptable. As you can see from the drawings, the extension is considered to be subservient in nature. It's set down from the ridge, it's set in from the front and rear walls. And it's also not considered to have a significant adverse effect on the living conditions of the neighbouring properties or future occupiers of the proposed development. The biggest concern we have here, Chairman, is the issue about the impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, particularly bearing in mind what is outlined in the conservation area appraisal document for this particular village. It's considered that there will be a detrimental impact which erodes the character of the old schoolhouse and the old school, and the conservation area appraisal document does mention 4 times that this particular building and the space on the side where the extension is intended to go is an important part of the character and appearance of the conservation area. The main test for members, setting aside the amenity and the principles, when you come to conservation area designations, is does the proposal either preserve the character of the conservation area or enhance it? And your officers are suggesting here, Chairman, that the proposed extension, by reason of its extension coming out into that side space, neither preserves nor enhances, but we can, in certain circumstances, set aside that less than substantial harm that arises from that problem if there is any public benefit that outweighs the less than substantial harm to the character of the conservation area. And what we are considering here, Chairman, is an individual's bona fide request to extend their property that's seen as a personal benefit to them and not an overriding public benefit. So on that basis, Chairman, we are recommending refusal as is set out in your papers, because we think that the proposal would result in an unduly dominating and prominent extension to the dwelling, which is identified in the conservation area appraisal as an important local building. It does make a positive contribution to the character of that conservation area, and as a result of the projection beyond the side wall, we don't feel it would preserve or enhance that conservation area and would be contrary to the policies that are listed in your papers and wouldn't meet the preserve or enhance test of the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. So on that basis, Chairman, it's recommended for refusal. I will leave up the proposed floor plans so that at least you can see the projection from the side wall, the cutting across of that stone boundary wall, and the fact that it would be set within from the main front and rear walls of both ground and first floor. So recommended for refusal, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Can we now hear the words that were submitted firstly by Mr. Fry, Chairman of Punnell and Swire Parish Council, and then the words of the agent?
Thank you, Chairman. So first up, we have the comments submitted by Councillor Philip Fry. So the old schoolhouse was built later than the school, as shown by the blocked up doorway in the main hall. The school was built with 2 play yards, but lost one when the schoolhouse was built. This is also shown by the different quality of build of the stone mullion windows and conspicuous stone coped gables of the school, but the old schoolhouse is very plain. When my family moved to Pucknell in early 1959, a lot of the cottages were condemned. Some were pulled down, others too made into one, and some had 2-storey extensions like this application. This house is just as it was, built in late 1800s, a very small galley kitchen and low lean-to bathroom added. Little weight should be applied to the conservation area appraisal, as it is so inaccurate. It's not true. The village is trying to put this right. In conclusion, the case officer and conservation officer's view is that I would like the village of Pucknell to look not what it is, and I hope you will look favourable on this application.
Thank you, Chelsea. Would you now like to read the words of the agent?
Yep, so the words from the agent are: my name is Simon Ludgate and I am acting as a plan advisor to the applicants in relation to their aim of gaining planning permission to extend the old schoolhouse in Pucknell. The application seeks permission to construct a 2-storey extension to the existing building. This will provide a further bedroom and an upstairs bathroom with a new kitchen on the ground floor. The extension, which replaces an existing extension, will be constructed with natural stone and natural slate for the pitched roof. The applicants are a young local family who have managed to purchase their first home in the area they grew up in and require extra space to create a family home. The existing house is very small and is attached to the old schoolroom, which is now used for community uses. It was previously the schoolmaster's house. The application has been well received in the village, with the parish council strongly supporting the application and a number of supporting letters from nearby residents who would be most affected by these proposals. The local Dorset councillor is also supportive of the scheme. The recommendation for refusal is based on a perception that the extension will dominate the street view and cause detriment to the setting of the conservation area and heritage assets in the vicinity. The report quotes the conservation area appraisal, which mentions views of the village church from the schoolhouse, and it is this vista which will be impacted upon. Unfortunately, the appraisal's reference to the schoolhouse is wrong and should have referred to the old schoolroom, which fronts onto the main street, and from which it's just about possible to reference the church. The old schoolhouse is located behind the schoolroom, and the extension would have no visual impact upon the visual character of the main street. The extension will be viewed from Look Lane, which it fronts. The report accepts that the scale of the extension is acceptable in its context as an addition to an existing building, but considers the scale of the extension too great in relation to the attached schoolroom. This is a subjective judgment which fails to consider the relationship between the schoolroom and the house. The house appears diminutive in relation to the school, and the limited addition of the extension is smaller in proportion to the existing house. The extension will not visually impact upon the relationship with the school building, which will maintain its dominance in the street scene. I hope the committee will consider that this modest proposal is acceptable and there is no demonstrable detriment to the visual character of the area. That's it, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Our first question comes from Councillor David Gray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could you put the summary sheet back up, please, Darren? My question really, I think I heard it right, that you're allowing UPVC windows, or it was proposed, and because that there was UPVC windows in the original building that the extension has been built on. Yet, if it's such an important building, did we allow UPVC windows to be put in there in the first place? It just seems odd. I know it's a minor point, but I'm really interested to know why a listed building's got UPVC windows and yet we're turning down an application because it's changing the nature of the village. Is there an answer to that?
There is an answer to that, Chairman. The building's not listed. That's the point. This building is not listed. It's a very characterful building that's set within the conservation area. The former West Dorset area has never issued many Article 4 directions across its villages that removes the rights of dwellings and homeowners to make alterations to their property for to bring under control UPVC windows. It is a planning power that is available to local planning authorities, but one that has never been used to its fullest degree on the basis of overkill, bringing too much bureaucracy and control to local planning authorities. So many of the villages in the former West Dorset area that I can vouch for have got no Article 4 direction removing permitted development rights. So if there are dwellings, even in conservation areas, they do have the ability to make alterations, such as window alterations, without the need for planning permission. However, when we have got the ability to control those changes, then we do seek to try and exercise that control. But in this instance, the existing dwelling, as I said, is not listed, has got UPVC, and the applicant is merely reciprocating that current approach.
Perfectly explained, Darren. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rogers, if we can look at the proposed elevations of the extension replacing the stone wall. Yes, we just go back to that previous one. If you're there. I have a few questions for you. Firstly, are you happy with those what I would call French windows, casement windows there? Are they typical of the street scene in Punnell? And do you think they give of the best design? That's my first question.
Well, the answer to that question, we recommend a refusal of the application.
So you have a particular issue with that?
I have a particular issue with the mass scale and bulk of the extension,
yes,
and the impact it has on the character and appearance of the conservation area.
Yes.
The issue of those bifold doors, they are a more modern feature, but of course theoretically it is possible that they could be inserted into the gable wall of the existing dwelling without the need for consent, hence my explanation previously to the Vice Chair about the benefit of permitted development rights. I mean, I don't think one would put those bifold doors in that gable wall given the narrowness and confined space of the existing dwelling.
So you're indicating to me that you don't think they would benefit the conservation area?
You're looking at a very small part of the overall two-storey extension.
I can appreciate that.
And the overall two-storey extension, we're saying, bearing in mind that that triangular corner is, in officers' views, an important one. We're suggesting that the extension, by reason of its prominence from the gable wall, is problematical in terms of the statutory test that you have got to consider as members, which is, does the proposal preserve the character of the conservation area, or does it enhance it? That's the test.
And those particular doors or windows are part of that. Thank you.
Yeah, they're part of that overall test.
And secondly, and I don't know whether this is a question for you or for Anne Collins or both, within the local plan, there is clearly a desire to maintain the affordability of houses in our local villages, and personal circumstances, as I understand it, play no part in planning, but this particular extension would make the house less affordable in terms of the local plan. Would you like to comment on that, Mr. Rogers, or indeed Anne Collins?
Chairman, if I may, as the presenting officer, and then Anne can either agree or disagree with what I say. Clearly, the small diminutive cottage style dwelling that exists at the moment is likely to be more affordable if it was put on the open market than the two-storey extension if it got built. We all know that additions to our existing housing stock increases or can increase the value of existing property. We all have to look at the cost of the extension and then look at the resulting dwelling that arises from that. And so clearly, in my view, there will be some uplift to the future for sale price of this property as extended compared to its unextended nature.
So you were saying it would be less affordable for future generations, clearly. Anne Collins, would you like to comment on that in the context of the local plan?
Yeah, Chair, I agree really with what Darren said. The local plan at para 5.7.2 says care has to be taken that the extension or replacement of existing buildings, in this case it's talking about dwellings, does not simply lead to a significant increase in less affordable larger dwellings at the expense of cheaper, smaller properties. Obviously, I mean, that's a consideration in respect of any application for a replacement dwelling or an extension, as to what extent you consider it to be relevant here, Chair. Thank you. Now we have a whole list of people wanting to speak, starting with Councillor Sarah Williams. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding listed buildings. You've stated this building is not listed. Is the school now Village Hall listed, and are there any other listed buildings close to this proposal?
Chairman, anticipating that question, can I try and show you a different slide that shows where there are and there aren't listed buildings?
Yes, please.
I'm going to try and do this if I possibly can. I might have to unshare and then share my screen again. So if you just bear with me a second. Can you see that?
Yes.
So the application site is here. Can you see that?
Yes.
The Village Hall, the old school hall, is here.
Yes.
And only this building in the near vicinity is listed. Brown buildings on this map show listed buildings. Everything around this building, nothing is listed. I come back to the point that it's only the characterful kind of style of this building and its neighbour as a house which are characterful, but they're not listed buildings.
Thank you.
Could you just show us again the extent of the conservation area? Because it appears to me that this property sits at the heart of the conservation area.
I'll just try and zoom out, Chairman. I'm zooming out. So this is our site here. And you can see that the conservation area is far and wide. So we are talking here, and this is all within the conservation area. Does that help?
Yes, it does, because it obviously it indicates the lanes in and around Punnell, and it indicates that there would be some effect on the street scene. So we've heard from Sarah Williams. Sarah, do you have any follow-up question? Any other comments, Sarah?
Not at the moment. I might come back later.
Okay, so moving on down the list, Councillor Weller.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? I'm not sure whether.
Yes, I can.
I haven't got my camera on. Just a second. Right now, you can see me as well. I'm in favour of this. Actually, we're really keen to help young couples stay in the village that they were brought up in. And if Darren, if you want to just put the floor plan back up there, the existing house really is not a family home, not for modern day. By doing this extension, it makes it a family home. Chairman, you spoke about it going up in price with the extension, and indeed it would, but every indication is that this young family want to stay in the village that they were brought up in. Now, of course, they might realise other things in other times. We can't predict that, but at the moment, as a 3-bedroom house, it's never going to be a substantial, expensive property. It is a modest family home. Giving the extension makes it more useful as a family home. Personally, I very much approve of it, and I would like to propose approval of this application, with or without UPVC windows, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Weller. Clearly, I have to ask all possible questions that come into my mind. Councillor Nick Ireland next. Hello, Nick.
Hello. Actually, my question's been answered, so I'll pass now. Thank you. I'm happy to second, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't see that this modest development would overly affect the conservation area. Oh, you can't see me. Sorry. There you go. It can't be seen from Church Street, which is the main road running along. As you start to go down Lute Lane, it wouldn't be seen until you're directly in front of this modest house. And even coming up this lane from the other angle, you have to, there's a slight bend before you would see this modest extension, and I support it. I'm in favour of it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dunseith. Councillor Barrow, I see you're supporting the application.
Yes, I agree with what Councillor Weller just said.
Yep. I'm going to give Councillor Sarah Williams the opportunity to come back. She said she might want to speak again. Sarah? Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I support this application along with Kate, and
right.
There are no listed buildings on overlooking the site, so I don't see a problem.
Right. So if we go back to the very beginning, we had a proposer. Who, remind me again, who was the proposer?
It was Kate Weller.
Kate was proposing. I think there was a bit of a rush to second this. Do I take it, Jean, that you're going to second this?
Very happy to second it, Chairman.
Chairman,
Yes.
it was seconded by Councillor Nick Ireland. It's already been seconded.
Yeah. Right, so you've captured that, Denise. So just going through the list.
Chairman, it's Darren Rogers here.
Yes.
Can I potentially, obviously, given members' considerations, can I offer a suggested conditions of planning permission if members are minded to approve the application.
Yes,
I'm certainly very happy to hear.
open to
Darren's
suggestion,
suggestions.
Mr. Rogers.
Okay, if you just bear with me a second, I'll just try and unshare and reshare a different screen. Can you see? Just bear with me a second. Can you see that, Chairman?
I can see suggested conditions should members be minded to approve the application.
We've got the first one, which is the standard 3-year commencement period. The second one, which is the standard plans list condition, and the third one, which is the submission of external materials sorry, not the submission, external materials to comprise of stone and render, because it effectively matches as existing with the slate roof, and UPVC fenestration as is specified, bearing in mind the UPVC aspects of the existing dwelling.
Darren, it's Anne here. Will we want to specify natural stone and natural slate?
I think it says that in the application, which is, I mean, bearing in mind that the list that I've got on screen is a paraphrase of what's in the application form. The idea was that the extension would match the existing materials.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Do you have any further comments, Mr. Rogers?
No, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So going through the list of members, myself, I will vote to approve. Peter Barrow.
I vote to approve.
Councillor Clayton.
Yeah, more than happy to approve.
Yeah. Councillor Cocking.
Yes, approve.
Councillor Dunsteith.
Happy to approve.
Councillor Gray.
Approve.
Councillor Ireland.
Approve.
Louis O'Leary, I believe, is not in attendance. Councillor David Shortell.
Thank you, Chairman. May I ask a quick question before I answer that?
Yes.
What is going to happen to the wall, which is shown diverting through the extension if it gets approved? Is that going to be moved to the side, or is it going to stop short? Or I just wanted to know what would happen to that wall.
We'll just have some clarification from Mr. Rogers, who's obviously well versed with looking at these plans.
Yeah, Chairman, it's as is indicated on the floor plans. It terminates effectively at either end of the front and rear elevation. So you know, the wall certainly won't go through the ground floor of the accommodation.
Right, thank you for that. I approve, Chairman.
Councillor Williams.
Approve.
And Councillor Weller.
Approve.
So this is unanimous and it's been approved. Thank you all very much. Right, our next application 5E WDD 19001397 Sunnyside Cottage, Highgate Lane, West Knighton. The erection of a double garage with annex accommodation. And this is Darren Rogers presenting again.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, can you see my presentation on the screen, just to make sure?
Yes.
Sunnyside Cottage, Highgate Lane, West Knighton, double garage with annex accommodation. Chairman, you can see the application site edged red, which is located here. Sunnyside Cottage fronts the Highgate Lane located here. Detached garage with a property to the south, and some other buildings to the north, which I'll come on to via the next couple of slides. This is the aerial photograph that shows the application site located here, and an existing garage to this adjacent property to the south. Sunnyside Cottage is here, and you've got Wayside Cottage and Wayside Barn, which are immediately to the north. And for those with a alcoholic refreshment idea to get and know where West Knighton is, this is the new inn in relation to where the the site is itself. This is an extract, Chairman, that shows the defined development boundary for the village in red, and the conservation area largely, if not wholly, follows the defined development boundary as well for West Knighton. As was explained on the previous slide, the buildings in brown are listed buildings. So this is Sunnyside Cottage, which is located and named here. This is Wayside Cottage, also listed. Rose Cottage is over here, and Wayside Barn, which is named on the Ordnance Survey plan, largely where the extension, the application site is, relates to this particular property, which is unlisted, albeit it may well have formed part and parcel of Wayside Cottage at some stage in the past. But you've got three properties: Sunnyside Cottage, Wayside Cottage, and Wayside Barn, and then you've got this cul-de-sac of slightly more modern residential dwellings located here. So these are the proposed elevations. So if I concentrate on this plan to begin with, this is Sunnyside Cottage, located here, which is listed. This is the kind of the garden area to Sunnyside Cottage, and in this corner, adjacent to the existing garage, albeit separated because of boundaries, it's proposed to provide a garage, storage facilities at ground floor level, and an annex accommodation directly above, so that when you view that from the street scene, this is the elevation that you'll see here. So this is Wayside Barn. That's the annex. It's like a little cottage structure in itself, providing garage facilities at ground floor and the annex accommodation above. And when you view it from the rear, this is Wayside Cottage. This is the garage and the annex, and you can see the respective heights. It is much more diminutive in terms of its scale compared to Sunnyside itself. Focusing a bit more clearly on detail, this is the application site itself with a car parking and turning area. You can see that you have a garage with bike stores and a garden store with log store set at the rear on a lean-to, and then pedestrian access to an internal staircase that will lead up to a home office stroke living room with a kitchenette, a home office living area, and a toilet. I know the Vice Chairman on my last committee lauded the excellence of visualizations, and the applicant has usefully submitted this axonometric type bird's eye view, which hopefully explains the scheme far better than 2D drawings. So this is Sunnyside Cottage and Wayside Cottage. This is Wayside Barn, and then the rest of the other more modern dwellings. This is the existing garage that's next to the application site and forms part and parcel of a separate dwelling. So the garage will be located here with the annex accommodation above, with a couple of roof lights on either roof planes. There is an existing hedge that forms part of the garden area to Sunnyside, which would be retained, and then you've got the more shallower garden areas to Wayside Barn, Wayside Cottage located just there. So that shows that in 2D form, in terms of its plan view, there's the hedge that would be retained. There is an existing shed that would be removed. That's the proposed annex accommodation next to an existing garage and store associated with this property to the south. Sunnyside Cottage, Wayside Cottage, and Wayside Barn. I've put this slide, Chairman, because it gives you a distance circa of around 16 metres from the rear elevation of Wayside Barn to the side elevation of the proposed annex. There's the shed that's intended to be removed. The boundary hedge is intended to be retained. And here is the photographics. So that's the hedge that would be retained. Wayside Barn, which has a thatch roof to it, but is not actually part of the single listed building in terms of those buildings I indicated earlier. This is Sunnyside Cottage. They're the more modern houses set at the back. Sunnyside Cottage located here. This is the existing garage to that adjacent house. So this is roughly where the annex and garage accommodation would be accommodated. Again, looking further into And from the street scene, Sunnyside Cottage here, that's the edge of Wayside Barn, that's the hedge and the shed that would be removed. The annex and garage accommodation will be provided here. And again, that's the adjacent garage to the property to the south. So our structure would be located in this area here. And that's Wayside Barn, Wayside Cottage in the corner, leading to Sunnyside Cottage just located here. The removal of that shed, and there's the hedge that would be retained. I just took this, Chairman, because this shows it from the other side, the northern side. This is Wayside Barn and Wayside Cottage, but our property would be behind here, so over the ridge of that. So that's where the annex and garage accommodation would be provided. And that view here is taken from effectively this access here. So Sunnyside Cottage is at this other end. This is Wayside Cottage, and then Wayside Barn is located through there, and this is Highgate Lane located here. So, Chairman, the principle of carrying out the proposed development, it being essentially an annex accommodation to accommodate relatives of the host building, particularly within a village that has a DDB, is considered to be acceptable in principle. We consider that the siting, scale and form of the building maintains a strong sense of place by reflecting and respecting the area's defining characteristics. We don't think it would have a harmful impact on the setting of the listed building or the character of the conservation area. We don't feel that there would be any adverse amenity impacts, and that parking would not cause harm to highway safety. We don't feel that the comings and goings would be particularly an issue in relation to either vehicle movements or to the amenity of neighbours. So, Chairman, the application is recommended for approval. The slide on screen indicates the standard plans list, standard 3-year commencement, detailed samples of all external facing materials for the walls and the roofs, detailed sections of all windows and doors, and that includes the roof lights that are proposed for each of the roof planes, and that the parking be provided prior to occupation. And then the most, or not the most, but equally as important, a condition that restricts occupation, not as a separate dwelling, but for purposes as an annex that's incidental to the enjoyment of the main residence known as Sunnyside Cottage. So on that basis, Chairman, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Rogers, and again, having that diagram which we see in front of us now is very helpful. Can we now have the representations that have been submitted, firstly from Knightsford Parish Council, if those could be read out?
Okay, so the first comments are from Nikki Bust on behalf of the Parish Council. So, on behalf of the Parish Council, I confirm that we still have objections to the development. The council rejected the plan for a single-storey double garage a few years ago, and therefore the PC is struggling to understand how a larger 2-storey building now appears to be considered to be a suitable development. The plot is small, and Sunnyside Cottage is currently let to 3 separate people, each of whom has a car. If a further room is constructed above the garage, that will entail at least 1 further vehicle on site. The Parish Council considers that the footprint of the proposed new build together with the parking and turning required on site will be excessive in relation to the size of the plot as a whole. The Parish Council considers the proposal will be an overdevelopment in what is a very small space.
Thank you. And we've also had a representation from Martin Mitchard.
Yep, so that's the Councillor Mitchard, and he says, I would like to make it clear that although I'm a councillor for West Knighton, which is part of the Grouped Parish Council, Knightsford Parish Council, my objection to application number WD/D 19001397 is my own and in support of Mrs. Jackie Thacker, widow of Councillor Mr. Alan Thacker of Tighton, the house immediately to the south of the proposed development. The description of the proposed development, double garage with annex accommodation, is misleading, as it suggests a single storey, and I look it to be such until I looked at the plan and saw that it was a 2-storey flat over garage. The plans for a double garage were rejected some years ago, so I cannot see how a 2-storey building of a larger footprint to the original plan, which will overlook houses to the left and to the rear and will be directly opposite my lounge window, can be approved. All the garages in the immediate area are single storey. Sunnyside Cottage is let at the moment on a room by room basis with 3 occupants each having a car. The house owner does not live in the property at present. When the annex is occupied, there will be at least 1 more car with possibly 2 more stored in the garage. Access to and from Highgate Lane could prove difficult if not dangerous. The footprint of the building along with the required parking and turning space will dominate what is a small garden of a Grade 2 listed cottage. If the building would have its own electric and water supply rather than be supplied from Sunnyside Cottage, it could quite easily in the future be converted into a small house. I think the proposal is an overdevelopment of a small garden. And then we just have the 2 statements, one from the applicant and one from the agent.
Well, would you like to read those, please?
Yeah, so from the applicant Duncan Mackenzie. I am the applicant and owner of Sunnyside Cottage. I would ask you to support your officer's recommendation to approve. I also wish to clarify some issues, particularly those raised by Mrs. Buss from the Parish Council, and correct some factual inaccuracies raised by her. I purchased Sunnyside Cottage, Sunnyside 2 years ago. The property was in extremely poor condition. I spent 18 months restoring the interior whilst residing at the property with my partner Phoebe, prior to taking a work contract away from home last year, since when the property has temporarily been let to a very quiet young couple. Whilst obviously not a plan issue, I am not aware of any noise issues from my tenants referenced by Mrs. Bust. We enjoyed very good relations with our neighbours while living in the property, and we shall be moving back into the cottage shortly. This is our main and only residence. We hope to start a family soon, and the annex is principally to be used as a guest bedroom for both my mother and Phoebe's to stay when they visit. Phoebe would also use this extra room created in the roof space of the garage as her own home office. Despite the comments of Mrs. Bust, the application is not intended as a separate dwelling, leaving aside that the building proposed is quite incapable of such due to its size. Such a use would in any event require a quite different permission. The construction of this garage annex with store at the rear will also remove the need for the current unsightly open on-site parking, and also allows the removal of 2 dilapidated timber sheds. Once completed, the remainder of the site will then be landscaped. No objections have been received from my immediate neighbours in Rose Cottage, Wayside Cottage and Wayside Barn. It should perhaps be noted that along with Sunnyside, these 3 properties are also listed buildings. My neighbours in Wayside Barn, which is a property most directly overlooking my garden, did initially express some reservations. However, once we reduced the overall size of the new building, they wrote to you to express their support for the revised scheme, for which I thank them. In summary, I would ask that the committee decide this application on planning merits and not NIMBY objections unrelated to planning matters. What is proposed here is essentially just a double garage and store with a room in the roof space above with skylights. There is no overlooking of any neighbouring property, and in my opinion, the building as proposed will both enhance and sit well within the conservation area. The next statement is from the agent Nicholas Brown. Members of the Planning Committee, thank you for letting me submit this brief statement. I would like to emphasise how carefully this application has been considered. The applicant submitted a detailed pre-application consultation setting out options for the works he was proposing with a full written explanation. The eventual application scheme followed the advice of your conservation officer, who considered the pre-application submission and who now supports a full application before you today. A thoughtfully designed coach house as we proposed will enhance both the host dwelling and the conservation area itself. The principal features of which are the cluster of listed thatched buildings adjacent to Sunnyside, together with a further group of listed buildings adjacent to the old school further to the south. These 2 distinct and attractive groups of listed buildings are separated by somewhat less attractive, oversized 1960s chalets to the south, Tigham, and opposite Shalom. The siting and design of the proposed coach house will in a small way help bridge the gap between the 2 groups of listed buildings. None of the owners of the other adjacent listed buildings have objected to the proposal. In fact, the owner of the building most directly affected, Wayside Barn, has offered support to the application. A most detailed application has been presented with a full consideration of your officer's views, and you will see that it is recommended to you to grant. The conditions proposed by your officers are acceptable to the applicant. I can do no better than to quote from your officer's report conclusion that, having assessed the proposal against all of the material plan considerations which are relevant to the proposed development, it is recommended that the application should be approved. I would urge you to grant permission in line with the recommendation. That's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rogers, can I, for the sake of consistency, ask a question again about affordability and the fact that this development would make this particular cottage less affordable to future generations, and indeed what approximately is the square footage of this proposed development compared to the square footage of the existing cottage.
Microphone's off, Darren.
Okay,
Sorry.
Darren?
Yeah, I've got you now, Chairman. Sorry.
This may, to some people, seem a fairly significant annex in relation to the existing cottage, and therefore have an effect on its affordability for future generations.
Yeah, to me, Chairman, that's not the principal issue here, the affordability. The principal issue here is, does the does the structure sit well in the conservation area? Does it harm the amenity of neighbours? Does it adversely impact on the setting of listed buildings? And I've got to say that given what's proposed, given what you can see on screen in terms of the scale of the structure compared to Sunnyside Cottage, this seems a very reasonable, well-designed and thought-out scheme, and that's about as much as I can say.
Yeah, you're clearly comfortable with the design.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Councillor Sue Cocking to ask a question.
Chairman, it's Denise. I believe that Councillor Roland Tarr was also addressing the committee under public participation.
Okay, Roland, if you'd like to come in at this stage.
Sorry.
Right. Yes, you can see me. Yeah, I thought you'd forgotten all about. I had the same difficulty as probably members of the committee are having now with this project, because we've got two completely different stories being told to us. I obviously represent the interests of the parish council, and their statements have been made very clear, and Darren has very kindly outlined the overall situation. So I think I would ask if the committee can arrive at a decision. That's why I asked for it to come to committee rather than be decided exclusively by officers, which that's all I have to say, really.
Thank you. Members, starting with Sue Cocking, would you like to ask a question, Sue?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know, I just wanted to ask Darren just to clarify the height of the building. I know in relation to Sunnyside, it looks lower, but I just wondered, just on neighbouring buildings, what is the height scale in comparison, and does it sit well? Is it lower than a lot of the neighbouring buildings, especially Wayside Barn? I just wondered what the height of the building was in comparison to the neighbouring buildings.
Chairman, can I answer that question?
Yes, please, Mr. Rogers.
Councillor Cocking, if you can highlight this cross-section drawing here, this is the height of Wayside Barn. Wayside Barn is set at a lower level than the application site, but you can see that the ridge line there, and I think what the applicant has done here is to indicate a potential previous scheme that was a proposal that was higher, because you can see that in the outline of the structure that was located here. So we've got this scheme now to a scale that we think is acceptable. I'll just come back to one of my other slides if I can, which shows that one there. You have got a roughly 16 metre gap between the rear elevation of Wayside and the side elevation of the annex that's proposed. And if I just come back to that one, you can see that the applicant has drawn a line from the ridge line down to where the ground where you've got the hedge just going there. So that's all I can ask you to do, is to look at the comparable heights of Wayside Barn and the annex. We're, as officers, are suggesting that that's a comfortable and not a domineering and dominant structure to warrant the justifiable reason for refusal of planning permission.
Okay, thank you very much, Darren. Thank you.
Councillor Dunseith.
Thank you, Chairman. On looking at this sketch in front of me, I see that the floor area of the garage is almost as big as of wayside cottage, which, if you're thinking of having a garage for 1 or 2 cars, does it need to have as much floor space as a cottage?
Chairman, can I answer that question?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Rogers.
This floor space, in my view, is slightly smaller than the cottage, and I do take the point. But can I just alert members to the garage that's on the southern side, which is set within the context of a dwelling to the south, and that's a detached garage as well. And having a double garage with bike and no doubt other facilities such as white goods that a lot of people have in their garages these days, to me, that floor space in itself is not excessive.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Do we have any comments from members? Any further comments? Do we have any proposals?
I'm happy to propose. It's Nick Ireland, if you want.
Nick, yes, thank you for your proposal.
I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Second.
Sorry, who was seconding?
I'm happy to second.
Okay.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Yeah.
Leave it with Sarah.
Right, well, thank you very much. So, just running through the list of councillors, I'm happy to support this application. Councillor Peter Barrow.
I approve.
Councillor Clayton.
Approve.
Councillor Cocking.
Approve.
Councillor Dunseith.
Approve.
Councillor Gray.
Approve.
Councillor Nick Ireland for the formalities.
Approve.
Councillor Louis O'Leary, I believe, is not in attendance. Councillor Shortell.
Approve.
Councillor Williams for the formalities.
Approve.
Councillor Weller.
Approve.
Thank you. So again, this has been approved unanimously. Our next application is item 5F, WD/D 19002027, the Mound Quayside, West Bay. Removal of shipping container and erection of a building used to house and refill diving tanks. And of course, this is in front of the committee due to the involvement of Dorset Council with this site. And the presenting officer is Lindsay Flello.
Hello, Chairman.
Hello, good afternoon, Lindsay.
Hello. Right, thank you very much. I hope, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yep. And it's moving.
Yes, it's moving.
Brilliant. Okie dokie. So this application, WD/D/19/002027 at the Mound West Bay, is before you, like you've said, at committee due to the applicant being Dorset Council. The proposal is for the removal of a shipping container and the erection of a building used to house and refill diving tanks. Here is the location plan showing the site in red and the Harbour Master office in blue, also owned by Dorset Council. Here is a closer plan showing the site in relation to the car park. 2 temporary permissions have been previously granted on this site, which allowed the siting of a steel shipping container and the timber fence. The container was proposed to house a compressor and associated equipment for recharging of air bottles used by divers also. It was approved in 2015 and then again in 2019, but only for 3 years, to allow the applicant to explore potential opportunities for a suitable permanent facility. Here is the aerial photo showing the current shipping container in blue and how it relates to the Grade 2 listed harbour and the listed buildings which are here, and I believe here also. The Harbour Master is also stated, so the building it's next to, the site, is also stated as a building of local importance in the West Bay Conservation Area appraisal. The site is also within West Bay's conservation area, Dorset's area of outstanding natural beauty, and a flood zone 3. Here are the existing plans showing the shipping container and the fence and the gates surrounding it. Here are the proposed
plans showing the building is larger than the shipping container, but on the same footprint of the fence and the gate. The building is to replace the temporary shipping container, and the building is proposed to be a timber framed building with timber cladding and a GRP roof, and it will be used to refill divers' air tanks, like I've said previously. Here are the photos. So you've got these are close up taken from the car park, and the proposed building would be in instead of that. And here is a further away view, kind of looking over the West Bay Harbour. So as you can see from the report, it's considered that the proposed building would be an unobtrusive, simple building that would preserve the character of the conservation area and would also not have an adverse effect on the wider setting of the listed buildings. It is also considered to not impact residential amenity, highways, flooding, or AONB. It was noted that the Town Council suggested the reuse of original material as far as possible, but this has not been proposed by the applicant. However, due to the location, it has been recommended that a condition be added to require details of the final proposed materials. It was also suggested by Environmental Health that a condition be added with regards to times for demolition and construction works to take place due to the close vicinity to the existing dwellings. It was considered due to the small scale of development, it would be unreasonable and unnecessary to add this condition. Therefore, due to the points I've said and the report, this application is recommended for approval with a standard plans list of 3 years commencement and a condition for the sample of the proposed materials. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor, the question for Denise Hunt. We have no speakers. Is that still the case? Denise?
Yes, Chairman, that's still the case.
No speakers. Right. Members.
Chairman.
Councillor Weller.
Chairman, thank you. If I could speak and then withdraw from the rest of the meeting as the chairman of the Harbours Committee, I'd be grateful.
Yes.
Just addressing fellow members, we asked our harbour masters to improve the income of their harbours, and our harbour master at West Bay and Lyme Regis did exactly that with providing this air facility to our divers. It was on a trial basis with the porter cabin, the container rather, and has proved very successful in increasing his income. It now seems appropriate to make that a much more aesthetically pleasing building. So I hope we've had no objections from any of our neighbours around thus far. So I hope members you will feel able to approve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. Right, members, do we have any other comments? Councillor Nick Ireland.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I should probably say that I am a scuba diver, but I've never used the facilities in West Bay. I use Weymouth and Portland. I'm happy to propose. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, thank you for that.
Seconded.
So that's seconded by David Gray. So just going through the list of members. I'm happy to vote to approve. Councillor Pete Barrow.
I approve.
Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Approve.
Councillor Sue Cocking.
Approve.
Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Approve.
Councillor David Gray for the formalities.
Approve.
Councillor Nick Ireland for the formalities.
Approve. Approve.
Councillor Louis O'Leary, I believe, is not in attendance this afternoon. Councillor David Shortell.
Approve.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Approve.
And Councillor Weller's already spoken and withdrawn. Thank you, members. So this planning application has been passed. We now move on to agenda item number 5G, WDD 19002947, land adjacent to railway station, off Station Road, Maid Newton, Dorchester. And our case officer is? Hello, good afternoon, case officer.
Hello, Chairman. It's Hamish Laird here.
Hey, good afternoon, Hamish.
Afternoon. Good afternoon, members. I'm showing the slide presentation for this application, WD/D/19/002947. It's an application by Dorset Council, which is why it is presented to members today, and it is an application for the construction of a 3-metre wide multi-use path between Station Road and the former branch line to Bridport, and this is at land adjacent to the railway station off Station Road in Maiden Newton, which is a small village outside Dorchester on the railway route between Dorchester and Yeovil. So just make the pointer a bit more effective, and on to the next slide. Here you can see this is the edge of Maiden Newton. This is the railway. So running in this direction is Dorchester, and running in the northeast direction is Yeovil. And this is the road that goes up to the station. Takes a turn up here. This is the station building with a platform on this side. You have an overbridge, a footbridge over the railway to get to the Dorchester side, and the railway goes over the drift, and so this road here runs under the railway, and so this area of land, which includes the application site, is on a slight gradient. And just moving to the bigger exploded view here, this is the application site. So you've got the drift road there, and quite a few self-set trees in this area here. This is a tarmac road that runs round into the station car park in front of the Victorian station building, and these are 2-storey terrace of 3 dwellings, fairly modern. So the idea is to put a 3-metre wide footpath in here. This goes into the bay, the former bay that the Bridport branch line ran into Maiden Newton station. And so there's a bit of cutting and filling and levelling, removal of some trees, and then also some mitigation in terms of reptiles which are known to be on the site, as highlighted in the officer report. So moving on, we have an aerial view. So this is the station building here. Roughly running through there is the multi-service path, and this is the area where the reptiles are known to be sunning themselves on a day like today. So this is showing the area of mitigation for the reptiles, and this is abstracted from the Biodiversity Environment Mitigation Plan. Photographs. So this is the road which runs up to the station building here, just off picture. These are the steps up, overbridge, the footbridge over the railway, and just behind, in this area, just behind the newly placed lamp standard, is the location of the multi-surface path, and these are the self-set trees I referred to earlier. We're going to go down here next to have a look up towards the station building, which is off to the right there. So looking up, this is where the lamp standard is, so your multi-purpose footpath link is going to go through in there, and this is the area where the mitigation is, that's for the reptiles, and this shows the drift going under the railway going over with this direction towards Yeovil here, Dorchester here. So this is a view from the drift road. So this shows the gently rising level of the land as it goes up to meet the railway, so the railway can go over the drift. And this shows the relationship with the cottages, the terrace of 3 here, and also the railway bridge, which we'll go to next and have a view back. And that going off to the left is the direction of the trailway, which runs down to Bridport. Looking from the railway bridge, that's the drift there. You've got the area for mitigation here, and you're running through roughly on this line with a multi-surface path. So it is to facilitate access to the trailway. It's promoted by this council and funded by this council. There is sufficient account taken of protected species, and it is recommended for approval. So this is just running through the items I've mentioned. The application is for the construction of a 3-metre wide multi-use path between the station approach road, Bull Lane, to Maiden Newton Railway Station, and the former branch line to Bridport track bed, which is a cycle track and a footpath. Officers consider that the layout and design details are acceptable. There would be no harm, significant harm, to neighbouring residents' amenity, particularly those people in the terrace of 3. There would be some loss of self-set trees on the site and an impact on wildlife habitat in respect of reptiles. But we have had a certified approved biodiversity mitigation environment plan accompanying the application, and in the event of an approval, the implementation of this biodiversity plan can be conditioned. Officers believe there are no material considerations that warrant the refusal of this application. Members will have seen from the update sheet that there was one late representation which spoke out against the application, saying that there was a gated access onto the railway platform. I've looked on Google Street Scene, but I haven't seen evidence of that. The station building itself is in separate ownership. It's occupied by a separate firm. It's not part of the railway. So this multi-surface path would also provide access to the railway platform, but in so doing, it does go into the bay of the former Bridport branch line. So in approving, or in the recommendation for approval, the conditions I'm proposing, which are outlined on the officer report, are the standard 3-year time limit for planning permission, the development accord with the approved plans, which are listed there, that we incorporate the provisions of the biodiversity mitigation and enhancement plan, and as it's railway land, if there's any unexpected contamination found, then that should be investigated in accordance with BS 10-175. So approval is recommended, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Laird, thank you very much. What I'd like to do now, I would like to see if Councillor Tony Alford is in attendance, because I know he wishes to speak, and if he is available, I'd invite him to speak now. I know Councillor Alford is particularly busy at the moment. Do we have Councillor Alford?
Yes, good afternoon. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can. Would you be willing to speak now? Is that a sensible thing to do?
Yes, I will
Does that
be.
fit within your diary?
Yes, because I have just been away for a meeting elsewhere and have come back, so the timing is very, very good.
And I believe you have another meeting later, so if you would like to speak now, please do so.
Well, first of all, this is in my ward. I thoroughly support the Trailway project, and it will be a valuable addition to the whole offer for health and well-being in our area, so it really is a very worthwhile project. This is just a small element of it, but makes a significant contribution, and I recommend to colleagues on the committee that they should support it. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alford. Now, we have had some representations. Chelsea, would you like to read those out?
Yes, thanks, Chairman. We've had 3 representations for this one. The first one I'll read out is from Madeline Duke. This application flies in the face of common sense in a time of financial crisis. It is totally unnecessary as there is a perfectly good disabled and cycle access to the cycle path/footpath via a gate to the right of the station building. This leads onto the platform and thence onto the path without any steps or other obstacles. Indeed, this access would be easier than via a path across the scrubland, as it is level and the new path must, by necessity, have a slope. Last year, a considerable amount of work was done to put a cycle ramp up the steps to the left of the station as well. The scrubland mentioned may not look wonderful to humans, but it is the habitat to various reptiles, and to destroy it for no purpose would be nonsensical and unkind. The next statement is from Deborah Batten. This is an unnecessary piece of work and a misuse of money. The land concerned, although small in area, is very important for endangered wildlife, some peculiar to Dorset. The disabled access in the station yard is adequate, as wheelchair users still have to use the crossing over the track over the lines to reach the other platform. Far better use of money is to ensure the gates are always accessible, perhaps using bollards and painting parking spaces in the car park so thoughtless people don't park across the gates. An added bonus would be that the area would more reflect Brunel's legacy. And the next comment is from Jackie Williams. I was surprised that an application for new disabled access to the cycle path in Maiden Newton is now at a stage where permission appears to be at the final stages. Until a villager informed me of the event, I had not seen any notice of this path being developed, and as a dog walker, I'm usually observant of such notices. I would argue that instead of intruding on the small wild space which provides an important habitat for our wildlife, that use of the existing access be utilised. The use of the station platform through existing gates and on which there is level access would surely make more sense. At the present time, surely we should be looking to spend on essential needs rather than projects which could have alternative and economical means of achieving the same ends. That's all the comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. I have some questions for Mr. Laird. Mr. Laird, are you there? Hamish?
I am, Chairman, yes.
Right. My first question, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Maiden Newton Parish Council are in favour of this application?
Yes, they are.
They are. The second thing, I think there's a bit of confusion with some of the objectors, because my understanding is that this particular link, this new link, would provide a link from Station Road onto the area which is southwest of the existing railway tracks, and therefore provide a direct link. And we're not talking about cyclists going over the track so much, going to the platform on the other side, but a link to the bay in which the Bridport branch, which closed in May 1975, which you're moving your cursor along, so that cyclists and those in disabled buggies, etc., could leave Station Road and go straight into the bay, which is a totally different thing, as opposed to going up Station Road, up a ramp, onto a platform, an existing platform, and then somehow finding their way down into the bay. Is that correct, Mr. Laird? Do I have that entirely correct?
There would be a level access into the bay, yes, into the purpose for the ramped area, Chairman.
Yes. So, members, you have heard that the Parish Council of Maiden Newton is in support. You have also heard from Councillor Alford. Does anybody have any comments or any proposals?
I'm happy to propose acceptance, Chair.
Right, so we've got a proposal from Councillor Clayton to approve.
I'm happy to second it, Chair.
That's Councillor Shortell, is it?
No, Pete Barrow.
Pete Barrow. I'm never good on voice recognition. You can tell that, can't you? So we have a proposer and we have a seconder. And thank you very much for that. So if we go down the list of members, I'm happy to vote to approve. For the formalities, Peter Barrow.
I approve.
Again, for the formalities, Kelvin Clayton.
Approve.
Councillor Susan Cocking.
Approve.
Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Approve.
Councillor David Gray.
Approve.
Councillor Nick Ireland.
Approve.
Councillor Louis O'Leary isn't present this afternoon, I understand. Councillor David Shortell.
Approved, Chairman.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Approve.
And Kate Weller, I believe, has left the meeting.
No, still here.
Are you still there?
I'm still here. It was just for the last item that I withdrew.
Okay, you're back.
I approve.
Right. So again, that has been approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Laird. Are there any urgent items?
No, Chair, I'm not aware of any urgent items.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I wish you all a good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. And I close the meeting.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chairman. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Chairman. Bye.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.